Okie dokie, welcome to this last video then. So this is the one where it gets ever so slightly more complicated. It's not too complicated, it just requires a bit of judgment by eye really, but that's okay. So hopefully you managed to get your composition looking something a bit like this. So you've got your graded footage, you've got your character moving around the footage in quite a sort of smooth arc, like so. So that's cool. So what we're now going to do is we're going to get to this point where we're at the sort of very bottom of the rotational movement before it starts to zoom in. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to I turned that on earlier, so I'm going to show you why I did that. I'm just going to zoom in on my thing just to make sure I'm on exactly the same frame. So there we go. So now I'm on the same frame as my other keyframes, and now I'm going to turn on my scale stopwatch. Okay, and what that's going to do is that's going to now add a keyframe in at the same point where it's saying I want my character to be at 20% scale at this point. So at the moment it's going to be 20% scale all the way up to this point. Okay, and we can zoom back out. Now what we're going to do excuse me, is we're going to move on to about the end of the footage. So there's a point where it kind of stops moving. There we go, that's that point, isn't it? There we go, like that. So that's our point, okay? And at this point then, what we're going to do is we're going to now zoom in and we're going to rotate our character round. So rotate the character in the way that they would have been going on the movement, okay? So that you can't rotate it the other way, otherwise when you animate it, you'll see your character will start to fly around in the wrong direction, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to move our character into an approximate position, like so. So I'm going to rotate my character a bit more, something like that maybe. Okay, and you can see now this is where our red dot comes in, right? So now our character at the moment is a bit big, so I'm going to probably drag his scale down now to about maybe 12, something like that maybe. So it looks about right within the frame. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to position my character so that his toe is over that red dot that we can see there. Okay, and I might just add a little bit more rotation just to there we go, that should do. And once you've got that cool, then we can now work from that. So the key, as I was saying earlier in one of the earlier videos, to do with stuff like this is for smooth movement, when you want to track objects like this, is to try and reduce the number of keyframes and let After Effects do all the hard work of then making the transition really smooth between those keyframes. In this instance we are going to be adding some more keyframes, but we're going to be doing it in a kind of structured way to hopefully reduce the number of keyframes that we need. So we're not going to just be doing it from the start and moving on and on. We're actually going to be now going to the middle and then adding keyframes between, and we're just going to keep adding more keyframes in those gaps until we get something that we like. Okay, so I'm going to bring my playhead marker back to approximately halfway through the change between where we started zooming in, which was these keyframes here, and the final bit where the image stops moving, which is these keyframes here. So I'm about halfway through, and as we can see at the moment, our character, as we did before, is now away from his mark. Okay, now we could use those handles that we were using earlier on the tracking lines, but actually they do start to sort of overcomplicate things once we start getting these slightly more kind of unusual movements, such as this corkscrew effect. So we might use those at the end, but we'll see how we get on. I'm going to use the position tools first. Okay, so I'm going to move my character up, and you can already see what's happening with these. The tracking movement is going to create a sort of corkscrew type ellipsis kind of movement, and so consequently we're gonna struggle to sort of use the handles to produce that. So I'm just going to put my character's toe onto that red mark, and you'll notice that my character now, because of the way that I've added the scale at the end here, that will now scale down smoothly from 20% to 12% between those two, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. All I need to think about is, okay, at what point is where's my character moving to, and the scale will take care of itself. So as you can see at the moment then, what we've got is we've got our start point here, and we've got our movement where he then goes into the green, and then he's in the right place in the middle, and then moves again, and then he's in the right place at the end. Yeah, so you can see what we're now going to do. All right, we're going to come between these points here, and we're going to tell it where we want it to be. So here's our position marker, okay, like so. That's it. There we go. And then we're going to move to here, and we're going to tell it where we want it to be again. And gradually, as we keep making these adjustments, you'll find that the angle of the track line should start to produce this kind of corkscrew kind of look to it as well. Okay, so that's still not going to be good enough, but it's going to be getting better, because at this point now we're telling After Effects where we want our character to be at different points. Okay, so at least he's now not going over the grass too much. Okay, but what we need to do now is we need to go into our the spaces between these and make sure that he's now not jumping around too much. Okay, so I'm going to move him to about there and bring him in like so and across. So using these, when these are on an angle, obviously they don't necessarily always do what you expect them to do. So it's just about practice, really, knowing which bits, whether we move him up or down or left and right. Okay, and gradually we are fettling this so that then we end up with something that approximates where his foot should be at each point. Can you see now the reason why we added this red tracking marker earlier? If we were trying to track his feet onto part of this pavement, well, it's very difficult to tell where we want that foot to be, whereas having the tracking marker means that we always know roughly where to place his foot, which then means that we now know that he's not going to be moving around too much, you know, because otherwise you do get those sort of After Effects looks where the person kind of just wobbles around a little bit inside the frame, which is not really what we want. Anyway, so I'm going to sort of come back to this. If this is going to take me a little while, because the last little bit is the adding of a shadow, so I could keep doing this all day, but I think, I say all day, I mean I'm nearly there, to be honest, but I'm going to leave it at that now, because obviously this is a tutorial and I don't want you to spend ages looking at me doing this. So that's kind of looking, that's not looking too bad at the moment, you know. So as you can see, we're now zooming in on him. At the moment he's sort of roughly staying the same size in the frame because his scale is now adjusting. So his scale should be moving down from 20% down to the 12% that we've seen, and his feet aren't really moving around because they're kind of anchored to that red dot point, aren't they? You know, so we've now got that look. Okay. The final thing then that we need to do for this to make it kind of convincing is we need to add a little bit of shadow. Okay, now the thing about the shadow is that if this was a strong day like in the video I showed you earlier, then we would need to spend a bit more time on this, because obviously we'd have much harder shadows and we'd have to actually really kind of try and replicate the shape of the person. But at the moment we haven't really got any kind of shadows in this image particularly to speak of, so what we're going to do is just add a sort of a slight shadow underneath, just to approximate that sort of, you know, just to make it feel like he's a bit more anchored in the frame, really. Okay, so what we're going to do finally is we're going to to our end here, we're going to go up to layer and new and solid. Okay, and we're going to make a nice sort of dark grey solid, something like that. All right, so that's our solid. We're going to turn this off. So we're going to go to the eye feature here and turn that off so we can't see it. And then we're going to take our pen tool, make sure that you've got your solid. In fact, I'll right click and rename that shadow so you know what I'm doing. Okay, and there's my shadow layer, so make sure you've got that highlighted. And what we're going to do is we're just going to sort of draw a rough sort of sense of a shadow underneath his feet. Okay, and don't worry, we're going to obviously make this look a lot better in a minute. That might be a bit big actually. I'll bring that in slightly. Okay, so that's our shadow. Then we're going to drag that down underneath our character so that it's behind his feet. Okay, and if we turn it back on now, we can see there's a dark shadow under his feet. Okay, job done. So what we're now going to do is go into the shadow, and we're going to open that up and open up the masks tab here. And in the masks tab, that's the mask that we just made, we're going to feather out those edges so that we're going to sort of make it nice and soft like that. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go up to normal here. So this is our transfer mode, if you remember. So this is the blend mode, that we're blending the object with our footage, and we're going to go to overlay so that we can actually see the sort of stuff through it. Okay, and then what we're going to do finally is we're just going to adjust this opacity. I mean, that might be a bit overkill actually. It might be a bit big in terms of what we want, so we can then go in and sort of adjust it. It only needs to be a suggestion really of a shadow, so I might just move this in to the side ever so slightly like that. There we go. Okay, And so you can keep playing with that until you've got something that kind of just looks a little bit like your characters stood actually on the ground and there's something underneath rather than it just being plonked on the top. Okay, and then once you've got that, all you need to do at this stage, and as I say, if you were doing the harder shadow, it would be slightly more complicated because you'd need to actually make sure that it was sort of staying the same shape, and you'd have to actually kind of move those the mask path a little bit. But for now, because it's only a suggestion of a shadow, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pick whip on my shadow. So remember this pick whip from when we've done motion tracking, and I'm going to parent this to my character. So I'll basically say whatever the character does, I want the shadow to do as well. And now when we move our character, our shadow ought to move with him. So I've seen there, look, my character's immediately moved off his line. So I'm just going to, just because I'm just as you can see, as I'm moving my character now, can you see the shadow's moving with him because I've parented it to my character? There we go. So whatever my character does, the shadow should do at the same time. Okay, there we go. So now, as we move our character, the shadow should move with him. And of course, this shadow now will expand as he expands to the point where now the shadow should remain in place even when we go back to the earlier part of our footage that we saw earlier. And you can look at that and you might be like, right, when we get to this point, it's too much. Okay, so you might say, right, from here, I'm actually going to add a stopwatch on my shadow, and I'm actually going to drag that shadow opacity down even more so that it's to about like that, maybe, so that it's a less pronounced. And all that then means is I come back to the end here, and then I just bring that back up again so it's a bit more pronounced back at the end here like that. Okay, so that's all you really need to do. Now again, that might be a bit over the top, but it's up to you. You can adjust your settings, and that's pretty much it. Really, is how to get yourself tracked into a sort of complicated shot like this, and also how to actually produce that shot in the Insta Studio program. So I hope you've enjoyed that. It'll be really interesting to see what you've got in terms of filming yourselves in front of green screens, or trying other footage that you've shot on the 360 camera, or even just complicated shots that you've done yourself with conventional cameras. So yeah, do show us what you've got, and yeah, we'll see you again soon for another tutorial. Cheers.